Let's continue with our analysis of the JSC interviews that took place this week, which have culminated in the JSC recommending that Justice Mandisa Maya be appointed Chief Justice. Let's speak now to Zikhona Ndlebe. She is with Judges Matter and she's a research and advocacy officer there. Zikhona, thank you so much for your time. You and I have been having various conversations, especially in the lead up to this particular process. When one looks back at Justice Maya's interview, you get a sense that, of course, she presented her vision and she put forward what would be some of what she would do should she be appointed to that process. But I couldn't help but wonder why some would think that if she's doing such a good job in the Supreme Court of Appeal, that maybe she should be left there to continue with her work, suggesting that some of her colleagues may not be able to cope should she depart. I mean, I found that this question really was quite bizarre, to say the least.
It was very bizarre, and Justice Maya dealt with that question head on, and with other few questions that were also bizarre. So Justice Maya has done very well at the Supreme Court of Appeal. She's ensured that there's transformation. She's ensured that there's collegiality. There were issues that were raised during previous JSC interviews about collegiality, the top six, etc. And she says that she has resolved those issues. And she's gone even further and ensured that cases are heard online since the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. And she has expressed a vision that she will continue. If she was to be appointed as the next Chief Justice, she will ensure that cases are heard online and make provision for those who do not have access to online resources or are unable to access cases online. So the question was quite bizarre. She's done so well. So if she's done so well at the Supreme Court of Appeal, she should perhaps go to the Constitutional Court. And she said that she would bring a different way of doing things to the Constitutional Court. And people said we did also say that perhaps another issue would be that she would be seen as an outsider because ordinarily Chief Justice were appointed from the Constitutional Court. But she dealt with that as well. She said that the justices at the Constitutional Court are justices that came from the Supreme Court of Appeal under her leadership. So they do have good relations she does have good relations with those justices at the Constitutional Court. So they do respect her. And if she were to be appointed, she would not be an outsider as most thought. And definitely the fact that she should stay at the Supreme Court of Appeal, it is irrelevant. She's done well. She will do well as well at the Constitutional Court.
And Zikhona, I just finished a conversation with Professor Kathy Powell from UCT, who suggests that, her vision was not given a chance to be interrogated. Instead, she was asked mostly irrelevant questions and thus not really presenting, her argument and defending that particular vision, and also even some of the suggestions that she may have been treated somewhat softly, for lack of a better word. I wonder what your thoughts are.
Each of the four candidates were given approximately 30 minutes to state their vision. And then after that, different questions were accepted from the different commissions. And all the candidates took their 30 minutes and stated their vision. And we thought that she did so succinctly and in a way that is understandable. As to whether she was treated differently, her interview did last shorter than the other interviews. It ended just before 5 o'clock. And perhaps something can be drawn from that, perhaps not. And perhaps one thing that can be drawn from that fact is that maybe she was able to articulate herself much better than the other candidates. She was able to state exactly what she sees happening for the judiciary better than the other candidates. That is something that could be seen from that fact. But as to whether she was treated differently or not, yes, the questions that were posed to her, some of them were irrelevant, such as, is South Africa ready for the next Chief Justice? And that question was posed to the other candidates as well.
Now, when one looks at what she had to say, I found this very interesting when she agreed with Justice Madlanga and his call to change the requirements for the court quorum, from 8 to a different number, and this is to prevent split rulings. I wonder if this, was such a good idea, or is such a good idea, should it happen, especially because some may argue that who do you pick and who do you leave out?
That is absolutely correct. So as they've said, that would require a constitutional amendment, and that would take some time. And as you've pointed out, the quorum issue, it would be quite complicated. So it would be something that the Chief Justice would have to work on, and it is something that a Chief Justice would have enough time to actually work on if they were to be appointed and start that process. And yeah, you're correct. Who will sit in which case would be an issue. But if that were to happen, the head of the Constitutional Court would have to step in and make sure that the implementation of that vision is done in a fair manner and in a manner that all the Constitutional Court justices agree to.
And Zikhona, there are some calls as we speak tonight for these interviews to be redone. You're looking at the Helen Suzman Foundation, for example, saying that, these interviews were, the process was an abomination and threatening court action. And there's also that letter that was written by Professor Cruz from from Rhodes University. I wonder, what are your thoughts on this process really being done again? Because remember, when we spoke, we were even talking about how it's been going on for so long and it should have been wrapped up by now.
It's quite unfortunate that we find ourselves in this position again. We saw in April, obviously it was not for the highest position in the judiciary, but it was for Constitutional Court interviews, where there was litigation and those interviews had to be redone. And the candidates had to wait months to almost a year to be appointed. So the candidates that had been recommended in April were recommended again in October. So the main issue that we have always said is our concern as judges matter when it comes to the JSC is that there's no set criteria. There are absolutely no guidelines as to how commissioners must conduct themselves. And that goes back to the fact that the April interviews were redone and the same candidates were recommended for appointment. So without a set criteria, without guidelines, the same issue is going to persist. The JSC needs to be reformed, and that reform will be in having a set criteria and having guidelines as to how the commissioners have to conduct themselves and how the chairperson has to chair the commission. That's very important.
And Zikhona, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your thoughts this afternoon. Of course, as we wait then for the president to make his final decision when it comes to this particular matter, because a recommendation by the JSC does not necessarily mean that the president will go towards that direction, because he still needs to consult with the opposition parties as well. So we are going to wait and see who President Ramaphosa really does, put down as the person that is going to be the leader of the judiciary. That was Zikhona Ndlebe, the Judges Matter Research and Advocacy Officer.